In this video we share Pope Benedict XVI on the final rebellion against God. Benedict XVI said that at that time there was the final rebellion against God. In the 1960s there was a revolution in the world that escalated through the decades. And that led to what Benedict XVI classified as the final rebellion of men against God. Only today are we becoming aware of the rupture generated in the 1960s. Here we will talk about how this revolution took place, what new morality introduced into the world, how it was escalating, and why Benedict XVI says that it is the final rebellion against God. Looked at half a century later, what happened in the West in the 1960s was a great revolution that changed the world and plunged it morally into what we have today. The French Revolution had put bureaucrats in place of kings and priests. The Industrial Revolution had taken the workers out of the home and placed them in the factories, and incorporated women to work outside the house. While the revolution of the 1960s imposed the deconstruction of the family and human sexuality, and the reign of primary impulses and unreasonableness. He put individual welfare rights ahead over personal and family obligations. Hence sexual freedom, contraception, and the professional career of women, instead of family life and different roles for men and women. And a new order was established based on the rejection of forms of authority, on free love without guilt, on the empowerment of women, and on the deconstruction of the family and natural sexuality. Which led to today's gender ideology. And how did this happen? The emblem of this revolution was the May of Paris of 1968, but the rebellion against the dogmas of the previous world happened both in the West and behind the Iron Curtain. In Czechoslovakia, the Prague Spring took place, which lasted 8 months, starting in January. In the United States, the protests against the Vietnam War, the hippie movement, and the Woodstock Festival in 1969. In Latin America, student revolts were influenced by the Cuban Revolution of 1959, and guerrilla centers appeared in several countries. And the May of Paris 68 of the Catholic Church was the Second Vatican Council, from 1962 to 1965, which meant an opening to the new values of the world. The centrality of the Pope was questioned and decentralization was requested, aspects of the doctrine were questioned, such as that Catholicism was the only way to salvation, it was claimed not to use more cassocks in daily life, etc. And Latin American Catholic religiosity was tinged with Marxism, through liberation theology, in the same way that May of Paris 1968 was tinged with Trotskyism and anarchism. The revolution of the 1960s left behind the golden 60s, with its enormous material progress, the result of the scientific development of the years following the Second World War. The West had become very materialistic, distancing itself from spiritual values. He had reached an atheist lifestyle, which was intended to structure society, without taking into account spiritual values or the rights of God. But little by little the rebellion came. The institution of the family, education, work and leisure centers were progressively penetrated by egalitarianism. And the most emblematic revolt began in France, at the University of Nanterre, on March 15, 1968, when male students invaded the residence reserved for young women, protesting against the separation of the sexes. On May 3, students from the Sorbonne University in Paris demonstrated to support their colleagues from Nanterre. And the Latin Quarter of Paris became a battlefield. The students built more than 600 barricades, caused great damage and were heavily repressed by the police. On May 13, workers at a Renault car plant and other factories left work to join the students. And soon, 10 million workers joined the protest movement. And the factories closed or occupied by workers. There was no gasoline, no trains, no mail delivery. Economic life in France was paralyzed. A climate was established in which there was dialogue, night and day, about philosophy, on the street, on the barricades, in the offices, in the factories. And all kinds of slogans were painted as if God existed, it would be necessary to kill him, forbidden to prohibit. Let's be realistic, let's ask for the impossible. Showing the tendency to free the senses of coercion and of God, and to free the imagination of the chains of functional and utilitarian reason. In the face of widespread chaos, de Gaulle's government carried out a march of 1 million people through the Champs-Élysées. The students calmed down, the fights with the law enforcement agencies disappeared, the trade reopened its doors and everything worked again. And 4 weeks later, 55% of the French supported de Gaulle in the national election. Thank you for supporting my channel. May God bless you and keep you. Our Lady, Queen of Peace, pray for us.